bit of a challenge because I'm definitely not going to be here next week, which means whatever I start, I have to finish and tie up in a nice little bow here within 30 minutes, which is going to be fun. Jacob was talking about Habakkuk or Habakkuk, however you want to pronounce it. I'm not going to tread on his topic, which meant I had to come up with something new. And I figured a lot of times what happens when you're just filling in quickly, you look at the daily Bible readings and try to work off of that, which is what I'm going to do. From the Old Testament readings, for those who do the daily readings, the Old Testament portion is in the book of Numbers. And yesterday it was Numbers 22 through 23. I think this morning it's 24, which happens to be the story of Balaam, which is always interesting. And it's interesting for many reasons. What's interesting first is it's essentially a book. The 3 chapters are like a book within a book. And you have a comparison perhaps you can make with the book of Jonah. And the reason is that Jonah was a prophet, and it's a very small, I think it's 4 chapters, the book of Jonah. And amazingly, Jonah is actually 1/3 the length of the story of Balaam here in Numbers 22, 23, and 24. And to me, that's remarkable that a character would get so much airtime, if you want to call it that, here in the book of Numbers. And there are other similarities between Balaam and Jonah. Both books, both prophets they kind of come across as scheming prophets who flip back and forth between obeying and disobeying God. And in the account of their story, they come across as pouty, unhappy men, and even a bit of temper shows up in places in both accounts. Now, normally we hear that Balaam is a prophet, but the funny thing is, if you read the book of Numbers, you won't find the word prophet ever associated or assigned to Balaam. The one place you do find in the Bible the word prophet linked to Balaam is in 2 Peter 2, which is what I have up on the screen. So, Jason, I think you've got the mic. If we get someone to read this portion here.
But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their licentiousness, and because of them, the way of the truth will be reviled. And in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. From of old, their condemnation has not been idle, and their destruction has not been asleep.
Now hold on to the microphone, Perry, if we can read this continuation here where Balaam comes in.
Forsaking the right way, they have gone astray. They have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing, but was rebuked for his own transgression. A dumb ass spoke with human voice and restrained the prophet's madness.
Okay, so here you have the one place I've found where the word prophet is associated with Balaam. Now, I said earlier that Numbers 22 through 24 can be considered or described as a book within a book, but it helps. Most books are self-contained, and you could actually, I guess you could make the argument you could read 22, 23, and 24 separated from Numbers, but I don't think you would do it justice. So let us talk about the context. What events preceded, for those who do their daily readings, I hope someone here does. For those who do, what events preceded the story of Balaam? There's quite a few, but let's get some hands. What events preceded Numbers 22, 23, and 24? The brazen serpent. Okay, that's right. That's one. So the children of Israel were mumbling, complaining like they normally do. And God brought fiery serpents upon them. They were dying due to their bites. And the antidote was to erect a bronze a serpent on a pole, and those who look to it would be saved. What else preceded? Ready?
Aaron dying.
Miriam?
Aaron.
Aaron died. Okay, well, I just gave away two, so that's you only get credit for one though. Rob? Okay, well, Rob, there's got to be something to precede this besides Aaron's death, Miriam's death, and the bronze serpent.
They're also very close to what would be their land, the promised land. They are
Bingo,
right
very good.
across the river.
Very good. All right, what else? There's a few more things in the chapter or two preceding this. I think Perry.
In the readings, I did think it was interesting that God says somewhere in there, I was trying to find it, but I can't at short notice. He basically says, yeah, Israel's a righteous people. And it comes just after complaint and judgment and judgment. And I thought,
You're
wow.
thinking of the part of the prophecy that Balaam makes about Israel being a righteous,
Yeah,
could find
God's-
fault within Israel.
yeah,
Yeah, you're getting ahead of us. I'm looking for preceding. There are two other events I remember. Randy, you want to give a shot?
Moses struck the rock to get water.
Excuse me?
Moses struck the rock to get water.
Yeah. You know, I'm in danger here because I'm down to 5% on my tablet. I wish I brought a cable. Anyone have an Android cable? Yeah. I can flip it on and off when I have an option, but I didn't even think about charging the tablet. I just grabbed it. Well, what I'm thinking of is the defeat of Og and Bashan, the two kings. Let me turn it back on. Og, king of Bashan, and Sihon, king of the Amorites. So those are the kind of the context. So what I wanted to do, and I'm afraid I know I'm going to run out of time. So what I'm going to have to do, close your
Walter's gone and
eyes.
looked for a charger for you.
I'm going to jump. So what I was going to have us do was read the entire chapter, but I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. So what I did was put all the verses up there. We're going to read it, but I was going to flip back and then talk about the verses one by one. And this is definitely going to be a challenge when I get less than 5% battery life on my tablet. So let us read starting at the top. So if we can get someone to read, I'll put some verses up and then we'll talk about it. You can go ahead, whoever, we can get someone to read.
The children of Israel traveled and encamped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was very afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was distressed because of the children of Israel.
Okay. Anyone know who the Moabites are?
Yeah. You see, there was a guy named Lot. He had two daughters. And there was
Yeah,
that.
Lot had by incest two sons, and Moab would have been first. Now, this map here will show you where the Moabites eventually ended up. You can mostly say they were to the east of the Dead Sea, and I think this is supposed to have a red dot pointer somewhere. Anyway, you should be able to see if you look at the M in Moab and the little blue spot below to the southwest would be. Which side? It's on this side, unfortunately, but you can tell you what. So they would be located to the east of the Dead Sea. Thank you, Walter. Here is kind of a blow up, and the red oval area would be where we would anticipate the children of Israel to be at this time. I mean, they're getting very, very close to entering the promised land. Someone said that. So they're on the east side of the Jordan, above the Dead Sea, and you can see Jericho. If you were in Jericho today in Jerusalem, you could actually look up, and then you go down the highway, and you got the valley where the Jordan River is. But then there's a series of mountains on the east side of the Jordan, and the children of Israel would be between the Jordan and the mountains on the east there. So, what was that?
They're just mentioning your thing as a laser pointer, but I don't think it
Yeah,
was
I just
working
don't
for you.
know how to turn on. So the top? There you go. Okay. So there's Jericho, which eventually the children of Israel would cross the Jordan and attack Jericho. And the opening of Numbers 22 talks about being on the other side of the Jordan across from Jericho. So the Moabites would be down here. It makes reference to the Midianites, I think, in the next slide. So we can get someone to read that.
Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now this multitude will lick up all that is around us as the ox licks up the green plants of the field." Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at that time. He sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, to Pethor, that is by the river, to the land of the children of his people, to call him, saying, "Behold, there is a people who came out from Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the earth, and they are staying opposite me."
Thank you. So I'm going to flip back. So there's a mention of Midian here. So there's going to be I'll call it an alliance. I'm calling it an alliance between Midian and Moab. We go back. I'm going to back out. So Midian would be right along in here. They'd be to the south of Moab. So you're going to get this alliance between Moab and the Midianites. Now, it made reference to fetching Balaam in verse 5, the son of Beor, and he was going to be fetched from Pethor. So I'm going to flip back. I'll keep going back and forth here between these slides. There's Pethor right up here. Now, that's some 400, 500 miles distance. So this is no small, go down the street, knock on the prophet's door. I need him to do a curse for me. That's quite a distance. So the king of Moab sends a delegation up to Pethor. Who knows? Could have taken a month or more.
So when they
Yeah.
say by the river, it's not referring to the Jordan River, it's referring to.
No, this would be the
Tigris and
Euphrates. So this is on the Euphrates. So you think you can see a little blue thread here. This would be Mesopotamia, essentially where Abraham settled after he left Ur of the Chaldees. So most likely he would have gone down along the coast through here because this is mostly desert. But this would be Mesopotamia, the area of the river, talking about the Euphrates River. So that's the river. It's not the Jordan. The Jordan River is a joke compared to the Euphrates.
You would come
And I
up
think, what's it, Naaman had.
or somewhere you're not into it right or something. Oh,
So that kind of sets I guess we've done the context and we'll also give kind of the geographical setting. So we got Balaam, who is known for his seer ability, soothsaying. And the goal here is to curse the people who worship are the Israelites. Let's continue reading. Let me get someone to read that.
Please come now, therefore, curse this people for me, because they are too mighty for me, and perhaps I may prevail, that we may strike them, and that I may drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed.
Okay. Now, I mentioned about Balaam, his name. If you were Hebrew, you wouldn't say Balaam, you'd say Bilam, like B-I-L-I-M. That's how you pronounce Balaam in original Hebrew. Balaam's name, if you were to translate it into something meaningful, would be there's the debate. It could be one of two things. It could either be Lord of the people. The AM part means people. So that's where you get like if you're familiar with Baal in the Old Testament talks about the altars made to Baal. Baal just means a lord. So Balaam would be the lord of the people, but you could also, some commentators would say that it's not Baal, but Bala, which would mean destroyer. So you got two choices. You either, Balaam's name means the lord of the people or destroyer of the people. So that's a little bit about Balaam's name. So in this particular verse, I want to ask you, does this verse bring to mind some other passage in the Bible that's somewhat similar? What was that? Promises to Abraham. Can you think of specifically what, can you get more specific?
I will bless those that bless, I will bless those that bless thee and curse those that curse thee.
All right, something like that? Yes. So this is Genesis 12:1. Now Yahweh said to Abram, go from your country, which essentially where Pethor, he would have been in the Mesopotamian region, and from your relatives and from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. I'll bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Here's the part that should ring bells. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who treats you with contempt, in this particular version, I will curse. So there's one similarity between, and there's going to, if I finish this lesson, you're going to see a lot of similarities between Abraham and Balaam, as strange as that may seem.
Is there any correlation between Aaron, where Abraham stopped for a little while, and any relationship?
I don't know
with
if
the-
Pethor figured into Abraham's journey. There's no reference. I really don't know. But that region, basically they were called from afar from the land of Mesopotamia to come down into the land of Canaan. So you have that similarity. And you have the tie with the blessing and the curse. So let's keep reading. Let me get someone else.
The elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the rewards of divination in their hand. And they came to Balaam and spoke to him the words of Balak. He said to them, lodge here this night, and I will bring you again, as Yahweh will speak to me. The officials of Moab stayed with Balaam.
All right, I'm going to flip the screen here and keep on reading.
God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? Balaam said to God, Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, he has said to me, behold, the people has come out of Egypt. It covers the surface of the earth. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them out.
Okay. One thing that's interesting here, he doesn't mention who the people are. And kind of wonder, would that have made a difference if Balaam had been told who the people were? So let's see what happens. We get someone else to read.
God said to Balaam, you are not to go with them. You are not to curse the people, for they are blessed. Balaam rose up in the morning and said to the officials of Balak, go to your land, for Yahweh refuses to permit me to go with you. The officials of Moab rose up, and they went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us.
Okay, so again, the people aren't specifically identified. It's just people they are blessed, some generic people who have come out of Egypt. Now, it probably wouldn't be that difficult to figure out. I mean, the news of the defeat of Egypt would have, been in the headlines if you want to put it in that context. So he probably could have connected the dots and figured out who the people are. Right, so I'm not saying that Balaam was totally ignorant as to what he was being asked to do. It's just interesting. It's not mentioned here in the text. It's also interesting. The word that gets back to Balak is not what, it's kind of like these games of telegraph or broken telephone where you say something to somebody. By the time it gets to the final person, it's not exactly the way it was when it was first spoken. So originally it was that Yahweh was not permitting Balaam to go, but it gets back that Balaam is one who does not refuse. It's that Balaam refuses to come with us. You might say, okay, maybe it's the same thing, but it is interesting. It's not exactly what the story says earlier. So let's continue reading. get someone else.
Balak sent yet again officials more and more honorable than they. They came to Balaam and said to him, "This is what Balak said, the son of Zippor says, please let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will promote you to very great honor, and whatever you say to me, I will do. So please come, curse this people for me."
All right. So if you're a prophet, let's say if you're Balaam and you've just been spoken to by God and God said, don't go. And okay, so let's now, the delegation has to come back. So that's maybe a month back, coming back to Moab. Then the king of Moab says, well, let's up the ante. So they go back with a higher offer. So now 2 months have passed, maybe 3 months will be liberal. So 3 months later, you're a prophet and the same request comes to you, except for maybe, you're gonna get a little bit more gold this time. What would you do? What would be your first response? What should your first response be if God had told you 2-3 months ago, no, don't go? That you think that would be, if you're a really smart prophet, it's like, well, do I think God's going to change his mind? That would be the only thing. Or maybe God changed his mind, so I will go ask him again. But if that's not the case, your first response should have been, I actually haven't brought it up yet, but your first response should be, no, I told you 3 months ago.
If it's possible to just back up a little bit and zoom out a little bit, I'm trying to get my head around this story a bit. So Balaam's up where Abraham and his family were near Haran, right? In the Euphrates.
The northern Mesopotamia region.
Right. And so I'm trying to put the pieces together here. So this guy, Balaam, has some connection to Yahweh, which the people of Moab are aware of, which is kind of interesting, right? So this would be the same area that Jacob went to work for Laban. And so it's fascinating to think of these pockets of the faith that are sort of scattered around outside of the nation of Israel. So another one would be Melchizedek, right, in Jerusalem. It's like, what's going on there? But so Balaam, in theory, is coming from this same region. And so the connection to Yahweh perhaps comes through Abraham's family that were left up there.
Yeah. I gave a talk one time that actually showed the sons of Noah, their lifespan when they died versus when Abraham was alive. And there was a little bit of overlap. So you could have had someone right off the ark still alive, spreading the message of Yahweh's name. And it could have been caught on. But what's amazing is that even with this lifespan of this one individual comes off the ark, you still have idolatry rampant all over the region. And that just tells you how corrupt man's heart is, that within maybe 300-400 years, whatever the lifespan of one of the sons of Noah, that we can be back into idolatry already. But yes, there may be a link between this region, why Balaam, he probably would have been very familiar with Yahweh. It doesn't mean that he was a Yahweh only, prophet. He could have been, Yahweh's the most supreme of all the deities, who knows? But
well, that's kind of the second part of this, is that if he has a connection to Yahweh, and then these people down in Moab, what makes them think that he would then curse the people of Yahweh? Like, it's very strange, is it not?
Well, they may not know that he believes that Yahweh is the supreme deity. It could just be that Balaam's notoriety for being able to foretell the future or whatever, or wisdom, is known. The detail that Yahweh is number one in his pantheon of gods may not be aware. I don't know. Because it wouldn't make any sense if you know this is a Yahweh only individual that you're going to call down to curse Yahweh's people. That wouldn't make any sense.
I'm also curious if there's something else that's kind of between the lines here, if there's more of an implication, if this king is not, commanding him to do this, but he's asking him to do this with an implication. And in verse 15, it says he sends more officials and more honorable. And reading from the complete Jewish Bible, it says of higher status than the first group. Right. So he's coming back again with more people, with more esteemed positions, and saying, hey, you want to do this? Right. Maybe?
But the question goes back, if you're a good prophet, what should your response be right off the bat?
Yeah.
No, get out of here. I told you 3 months ago, or I told your underlings 3 months ago, no, no's, no's, no. So, but what does Balaam respond? He answered the servants in Balak and said, well, if Balak would give his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the word that Yahweh my God did less or more. Now, you would think, okay, that's great, it's wonderful. But he then says, now therefore, please wait also here this night that I may know what Yahweh will speak to me more. I mean, what part of no didn't you understand, Balaam? So anyway, Balaam decides to seek the Lord once more. God came to Balaam that night and said to him, if the men have come to call you, rise up, go with them, but only the word that I speak to you, that must you do. Now, here's an interesting twist. You would think no is no is no. Why is God changing his mind, it would appear? Now he says go. Before, God said don't go.
I wonder if it goes along with where David talked about that God would add iniquity unto iniquity. In other words, if somebody is just bent on going, because obviously he had some personal things to gain from it, that he keeps pushing to see if he can perhaps have the best of both worlds. But
Yeah.
he's adding iniquity unto iniquity. And so, all right,
Well,
I'll let you
what I
go.
suggest is if this game continue playing, ping pong back and forth to Moab, back to Pethor, back to Moab, back to Pethor, I keep raising it higher and higher until we get someone to capitulate. What I would suggest to you is God isn't really changing his mind, but rather he knows that Balaam's not going to be satisfied. We'll let you go, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to create a lesson out of this. I'm going to create a blessing out of this. So I would suggest to you that is why you don't say God changed his mind. But what you'll see later on is that it turns out to be a blessing for Israel. And it's going to be a lesson for us too, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through it today. But someone, Brandy?
I just want to back up to him sending a second delegation. Remember, they didn't tell the king that Yahweh had told Balaam to not come. They just said Balaam doesn't want to come.
Right.
So he raises the ante.
So it'd be natural for him to just raise the ante. Yeah. Okay. All right. God came to Balaam at night and said, the men have come to call you, rise up, go with them, but only the word that I speak to you, that you must do. Now, if we continue, this is where I mentioned earlier, there's similarities between Balaam and Abraham. Here I've highlighted some of the similarities. So down below, I've got Genesis 22, and this is the story about offering Isaac on Mount Moriah. And the similarities is, I've highlighted in red, both men rose up early in the morning and they both saddled their donkeys. All right, and what's also interesting is that they both took two lads or two servants with them. Now you must say, that's just a coincidence. Maybe. So what else is common between Abraham and Balaam? Well, if we were to continue reading the Balaam story, we have here in verse 23, the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the road and with the sword drawn in his hand, and the donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field. Balaam struck the donkey, turned her into the road, and then the angel of Yahweh stood in the narrow path between the vineyards, a wall being on this side and a wall on that side. Then Yahweh opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with the sword drawn in his hand. In the Genesis passage, we have an angel of the Lord. Remember, as Abraham was about to slaughter or kill his son, an angel of Yahweh appeared, cried out of heaven, and he said, do not reach out your hand toward the boy, do not do anything to him. So we have an intervention of an angel of Yahweh preventing the two men from continuing on what they would normally have done if had been left alone. And then there's also, in verse 31, then Yahweh opened the eyes of Balaam. In the case of Abraham, Abraham's eyes were opened, and he looked, and behold, there was a ram in a thicket. So here we have some more commonalities or similarities between the two. I mentioned earlier the similarity, they both came from Mesopotamia. They are also both referred to as prophets. This one is passages from Genesis 20, verse 4 through 8. I won't read the whole thing, but this is one of the stories where we're talking about deceit this morning. Abraham was deceiving, I can't remember, Abimelech in this case, Sarah, she is my sister. Well, that was not quite all true. But in the response, God says to Abimelech that go have Abraham pray for you. He's a prophet. So we have all these similarities, and I don't think they're just coincidences. You might think so, but within Judaism, the rabbis say that these are not coincidences. They're actually intended to be brought to our attention. And what they come out of this with is that Balaam and Abraham are serving as models, two contrasting models. And there's this passage within Jewish rabbinic writings, whoever has these three things in is from the disciples of our father Abraham, and whoever has the three other things is from the disciples of the wicked Balaam. So the first part is referring to Abraham, a good eye, a subdued spirit, and a modest personality. Such a person is from the disciples of our father Abraham. A wicked eye, an uplifted spirit, and a greedy personality, such a person is from the disciples of the wicked Balaam. So the rabbis see these similarities and then come up with this observation. Now, I know we're not going to be able to finish, but I wanted to bring up this talking donkey situation. That always seems to cause people to scratch their head. What can we draw from the talking donkey? Is there any lessons we can learn from the talking donkey? It says here, the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh and she thrust herself against the wall. Now, at some point, the donkey actually starts talking. Yahweh opened the mouth of the donkey and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, because you have mocked me, I wish there was a sword in my hand, for now I would have killed you. And the conversation goes on. The one thing that I take away from this, an important lesson, is that the proof of a spiritual leader's integrity is not based upon simply the words that he or she speaks in the name of God, on God's behalf, or as a witness to God. Rather, the proof of a true spiritual leader is whether the words that that person is speaking has transformed that individual. And that is what makes Abraham, it's what makes Moses great. It wasn't that they were simply privy to God's word that made them great, but their lives reflected that word which came through them. And that is one takeaway I get from the donkey. Now, to say, how would you get that? Well, see if I got this here. Here's how I get this. It's interesting. We'd have to jump to the next chapter, chapter 23. But in chapter 22, you have Yahweh open the mouth of the donkey. Well, look what happens in the next chapter, verse 5. Yahweh put a word in Balaam's mouth. Okay? You have a donkey who God is putting his words into the donkey's mouth, and you have Balaam who God is putting God's words into the prophet's mouth. And what I just told you before is what I'm driving at. God could use anything. He could use a parrot. He could use a dumb donkey. He could use you. But if all you're doing is speaking God's word, and it's not changing and affecting your lifestyle, the way you think, what you set your heart on, then honestly, you're no better off than the dumb donkey that God was using. You're just simply a mouthpiece of God. So that's the lesson I wanted to make sure I got in here, is that just being close to God's word isn't the end all. You can walk around with the Bible memorized and tell me every single fact about the Bible that could possibly be thought about. That doesn't make you close to God or be a man of integrity or spiritual leader. And that's the difference here between Balaam and Abraham, or Balaam and Moses, is that God's word bearer has to be transformed. The word has to change that person. And if it doesn't, look, a donkey can do just as much as you who are just mouthing off Bible verses if it's not changing your life. So that was the key thing I wanted to make sure I get in. So Perry, feel free.
This just goes with what you said. So in Proverbs 12, verse 10, it says, "A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel."
I was going to bring up a proverb here. Go to the ant. We can learn sometimes from nature, from God's creation. Go to the ant, lazy one, and watch his ways and become wise. Well, if I was Solomon and I had some time on my hand to write proverbs, here's one proverb I would write that would come out of today's lesson. He who speaks the words of life but walks in the way of the unjust is like a brute beast, or even a donkey can quote scriptures. And that comes from Proverbs 1:1 in the book of Philip. So that is really what I wanted to drive home. There were a lot more, but I think people trickling in that we're not. And you can kind of remember too Paul's words about love. You know, you could be full of prophecy, you can have all these miracles, but if you don't have love, then you're nothing. You're just a clanging gong and a tinkling cymbal.
So Jesus makes the comment about rocks crying out and praising. And when the Pharisees and scribes were condemning the people for praising Jesus. So God is to be praised regardless. It's what you had said before. Affected hearts should proclaim something out of your mouth to say, God is holy, God is righteous, Hosanna in the highest. So, but coming from rocks doesn't mean anything, like water coming out of a rock doesn't mean anything if you don't understand where that goodness comes from.
Okay. Well, but here we ran out of time. So Jacob will be back next week from what I hear. He'll pick up how it goes.
What's from Philip's book of Proverbs 1.
I'll have to work.
Yes. Yeah, I can. Okay. Do we have suggestions for prayers for others? Someone left me a note for Sister Chrissu Schladiger, who either is having or had knee surgery on Tuesday. Is that past or future? Okay, so she will be having it. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Just a prayer for Jacob Pittman, who is getting baptized today, that his walk in the Lord will be strong and fruitful.
Jacob Pittman?
Jacob Pittman.
That's
from
awesome.
Norfolk.
That's their son, right? How old is he? It's like,
Jacob Pittman's, I think, 15, 16. Yeah.
awesome.
I have a friend, her grandmother is not doing well. She's got a bunch of health